All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
We are on, and hello all. 2 o'clock in the east, 11 o'clock-ish in the west. We always come on. We're an ish-ish kind of show. We sort of get you, 2 p.m.-ish in the east. We get you 11 a.m.-ish in the west. And we sign off at 1 p.m.-ish in the west and at 4 p.m.-ish in the east. We're on for 2 hours-ish every day, Monday through Friday. It's great to have everybody here. Come on your feet, goddammit. Let's feel good. I know, big election, but big news already out of the state of Georgia that likely, we'll talk to Brother Rothmann about this, but I would think that early voting at a record pace, which is what's happened in Georgia, may favor Democrats, and that's well, all right. I mean, I can see it's a partisan crowd. All right, that's fine. I guess you guys care about women's reproductive rights and, about an unhinged, crazy man taking the Oval Office again. You care about a guy who's engineered a coup. Fine. If that's the way you want to be, I'm okay with that. I have a lot of stuff to get to today. Wow. John Rothmann is not the only distinguished visitor we'll have today. He, the presidential historian, author, lecturer, and former KGO colleague and talk show host. But Corey Brettschneider is here. He's a brilliant constitutional lawyer and professor at Brown University. And he's written a new book. And it goes through, actually, John Rothmann should stay tuned for it because, hang out and check out the video later, whenever, on YouTube. Because Corey goes through past presidents and how the Constitution has, shall we say, been stressed to restrain them. And I think you'll find it really fascinating. By the way, I am hearing an echo from Kim, I'm guessing. She's got that echo thing. That's why we pay her extra, because she lets us hear our show again in real time. Yep, who can't love that? Who can't love it? I love it. I love hearing myself. It's an echo. It's my favorite thing, listening to myself, everybody. Yeah, I really do love it. All right, so I want to get first. What is the problem, Tony? Tony is here.
We can try an experiment with Kim and see if it works on your mic settings.
Yeah,
we can do it later.
Okay. I'm glad we can do this stuff on the air instead of anything off the air. Yeah, why not try all the experiments that we can do? And it's not enough.
The train wreck's way more fun than the actual show. Come on.
Yes, you're right. It's true. I have my imaginary cup of Coachella Valley coffee, says Jose de Jesus. Yes. Well, the imaginary cup is a start. Coachella Valley Coffee, our ongoing partnership, been so productive. I have a cup right here, as a matter of fact. Yeah. Mm-hmm. The magical Coachella Valley Coffee. It was suggested that yesterday somebody said, why didn't Coachella Valley Coffee run out to those people waiting for the Trump buses that were never coming to take them back from their Trump rally and sell some coffee? Yeah. Coachella Valley Coffee just made a big deal. They're a small roaster. I drank Coachella Valley Coffee. I don't get off on this. This will be a quick digression, less than a minute. But I drank their coffee for years. And the fact that they're on the show as a sponsor is so exciting because I've always loved their coffee. I think it's the best coffee on earth. But to see them explode like this is something I never would have anticipated. So they're the official coffee of the the tennis tournament down in the desert, and then I believe the Palm Springs Airport has them there. So anyway, I'm really proud and happy. And by the way, if you do go to CoachellaValleyCoffee.com, knock around their site, buy some coffee, buy some tea. They've got great stuff. Everything is curated personally. It's as I say, it's kind of a boutique roastery. And for that reason, I want you to use Mark T at checkout to get 10% off. Mark T at checkout, 10% off anything, coffee, tea, merch, whatever you want to buy there. You get 10% off with our discount code. So nice to see you in that great color, Mark. Thank you very much for breaking the ice on compliments today, and I'm hoping that there are many more coming. Yes.
I said that.
Hit the thumbs up. You did. That's Courtney, my other half, better half.
Courtney. Hi.
Hit the thumbs up button and subscribe. Now, this is really odd. I do want to get, I've got a lot of political news, and I've got a law and disorder that I really want to get to, Tony. Please make sure I get to this law and disorder today. Courtney's here because we're going to San Francisco for the San Francisco Fall Show. And this is something we're really looking forward to. It kicks off tomorrow, and it's antiques and design and art, and fine art. It's really something special. Courtney, you're in the art world, so I feel like this really hits you.
It does. It does. That's what I do. I work with artists, but it is an institution. I mean, this is the 42nd year of the San Francisco Fall Show. It attracts people from all over the world. There are more than 40 exhibitors who will be there. And it's an incredible event. It is one of those, as I mentioned, institutions in the fine art and design space in San Francisco. And so it's wonderful to be able to support them. The event starts tomorrow and runs through Sunday. There are lectures every day. And those participating in the lectures have written books. So there are book signings as well after those lectures. All of those tickets can be bought online at the same place that you can buy tickets to the show. And if you use the code MARK, M-A-R-K, all capitals, at Eventbrite, which is where you buy the tickets, you can find that Eventbrite link, though, also at their website, which is sffallshow.org. And if you use the code MARK, all capitals, M-A-R-K, you can get 25% off those tickets. So it's less than $20 a ticket. You can also buy tickets at the door and you can just give Mark.
You can just use the word Mark at the door. It's like a secret password, and you'll get 25% off.
And you'll get that percentage off as well. And Mark and I will be there. We'd love to say hi if anybody comes. But more importantly, this event is truly something wonderful, and it's so nice to be able to support it in the more than 40 years that it's been part of the community of San Francisco.
It's at the Festival Pavilion at Fort Mason, which is right on the bay. It's beautiful. So looking forward to it. And Courtney, thank you for making me aware of this, because I think it might have gotten past me. It's really exciting. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Courtney, what are you most excited to see?
Oh, goodness. Well, I work in the fine arts space, so I'm really excited to see the galleries that are coming. The theme is black and white, and
But you don't have to wear black and white.
But I think that a lot of the exhibitors will be showing black and white, and I'm very excited about all the fine art galleries that'll be there. But I'm also really excited to see the designers. That will be interesting as well. There are a couple lectures that I want to go to. I think I'm going to one on Friday, but certainly there are some great lectures all about different parts of the world in design, interior designers from the U.S., and also some fine art conversations. So
I'm looking forward to a celebration of art, Kim. There is a bar there. There is a pop-up. There is, in fact, I believe, Izzy's has a pop-up restaurant there. Yeah. I'm looking forward to festiveness is what I'm all about, everyone. So, Courtney, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
I wish we could keep you longer.
No, I got to go.
You got a plane to catch.
I got a plane to catch.
Get on it, girl. Get on it.
The Mark Thompson Show.
I'm excited about San Francisco always. I know there's a thing about San Francisco. You know, it's just a liberal city. It's all melting into the sea with all of the crime and the progressiveness, the homelessness. I'm looking forward to seeing some homeless people, and I'm going to knock off a smash and grab if I can. There you go. How's that? All right.
Don't walk around with your cell phone in your hand. Okay?
Don't walk around with your hand, for that matter.
Yeah.
They will take anything. Mark, it should be a West Coast time mentioned first, since we are a West Coast show, says Stan Pollock, CPA, my favorite CPA. Oh, interesting. Well, maybe I'll do that. I didn't realize that. You're probably right. The other comment that jumped out at me, and I just want to read it. Gosh, I hope I can find it. It was funny. Now it's lost its funniness. It's losing it even more. Almost lost all of its funniness, and it has lost its funniness completely. So I will not even chase it anymore. Mark, it should be West Coast time. I agree, and from now on it will be. Thank you for Stan's note. And what more can I say? Time to get started. So let's do it.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Yes, we have just weeks before election. And there is already big news out of the state of Georgia. Georgia, on their opening day, set records. It was the biggest turnout of voters on day one in Georgia voting in their history. I thought I had an article on it here somewhere, but now I don't see it. So, is it, who goes in here and changes? I don't see it. You're telling me that I don't understand why I had a whole, anyway, it's,
I blame you.
I mean, maybe it might be my fault, but I thought I had it in here. Anyway, I just, as I say, here it is. Here it is. I mention this because these are the signposts early. This is an article from the Atlanta Constitution, which I really wanted to read a bit of to you. By late afternoon, more than 281,000 Georgia voters had already cast ballots. This is just yesterday. And this is the first day of voting. And the first day of voting, if you contrast it, okay, in 2020, 136,000 voters cast ballots on the first day then. And in 2022, 134,000 voted on day one. So again, by late afternoon yesterday, 281,000 voters had hit the polls and cast ballots. So this says something. It is something that we talk about a lot on the show, the fact that the electorate is animated to be involved. It may be women's reproductive freedoms. It may be the fear of autocracy. In MAGA land, it may be those crazy libs, whatever. You'll tell me what you would ascribe this incredible turnout to. I would tell you that generally speaking, if history's a guide, those are Democrats primarily coming out in those numbers. Big turnouts early are typically Democratic turnouts. Maybe that will be changing under this new kind of Trump land sort of, you got to get out there and fight for your freedoms or whatever the hell he's saying, America first, or, you know, tariffs now, or whatever the hell he's saying. But your result is, I mean, an enormous number of people coming out on day one. Mm-hmm. CNN did a good analysis yesterday of the early voting in Georgia, and early voting is way up, but mail-in voting is way down. I don't think CNN thought the early voting numbers were significant. Oh, okay. Well,
it's hard to think they're not significant when I think and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I think they said last year it was maybe 100 and some odd thousand people had voted on the first day, and this year more than 300,000 had voted on the first day. That's a pretty significant increase.
Well, that's why I went through those numbers. That's exactly right. Mm-hmm. DeKalb County had 2-hour waits. And many people, you know, they waited for 2 hours. This is how spoiled we are in California. We have polling places everywhere. Typically, the wait is not that long. I think I had to wait a half hour once. Now, that may be also because of poor voter turnout. I don't know. But people are saying things like this. This election is critical to the democracy of our country. I'm still traumatized by Trump's last presidency, one person said. I'm sure there are Trump people who say, I don't want that crazy lib Kamala Harris anywhere near the White House. I'm sure they have them too. Here's a voter for Trump citing his positions on abortion and the U.S.-Mexico border and his frequent references to God and country. She went to the polls first thing today. That is yesterday. She considers, quote, one of the most important elections in history is happening. The what Randy was saying about CNN, and somebody else said it in the chat, noting that Trump was urging early voting. And perhaps there is a big Trump vote here. I mean, before, all the Democrats get too much of a bounce in their step, it is possible that these early numbers do reflect an animated base on the part of the GOP. MSNBC was trying to say it could favor either candidate, says Sarah. We know damn well it was probably Harris voters. Again, if you use traditional history, it would be a Democrat. But traditional history may not apply here. We are in a transformative age. And I mean, I don't love the transformation. We're transforming elections in a lot of ways that may be good. I mean, I like the fact that you can vote earlier. I think the ways in which you will be able to vote are going to change as well. But we hang on to these politically motivated, one-sided policies when it comes to elections. I'm speaking specifically of the Electoral College. It's an absurd system. It's why you have to sweat this election. Kamala Harris will coast to a popular vote victory. It will not even be a sweat. But the Electoral College changes everything. So we play in a fixed game in America. And that's the reason we're sweating it. So as you look at the Georgia numbers, perhaps it is a reflection of animated voter awareness and an animated voter enthusiasm on both sides. So perhaps Democrats should just cool their jets a bit. But it does feel as though it would be something traditionally, as I say, that would favor Democrats. So that's the early word, and there was definitely big news around that yesterday.
The Mark Thompson Show.
It was going on yesterday as we were on the air. And before we went on, I watched about 45 minutes live of Trump at the Chicago Economic Forum. And the head of Bloomberg News was talking to him and trying to query him about any number of things related to economics and Trump. And man, this is a skill. I'm a good talker, I think. I'm an okay talker. But Trump is, I'm tethered to facts. Like I'll even, hiccup here and there, like making sure something is correct before I'll say it. Or I'll say, I'm not really sure about this, check this out, but as I recall, blah, blah, blah. Trump, he's amazing, man. He just steamrolls. He doesn't give an S whether something he says is accurate or not. He is pulling these facts right out of his rear, but he keeps on going. And so the interviewer can barely get a word in edgewise. And I mean, I'm talking about 6, 7, 8, 9 minutes Trump will go on. And the interviewer will try to get that question in, and he'll go, excuse me, and he'll keep on moving. So his skills when it comes to the con are associated with talking fluidly, continuously, and with no regard for the information that he is spewing being accurate. And his skill also, I would say, is in killing the clock. He gets credit for just being there, and he just keeps on going, and he pivots from topic to topic, and it's incredible. Believe me, when you actually watch it, and as most of you have, it's a level of insanity. It's like a kid who hasn't read the book telling you about the book, and he's just going on and he's pivoting to other things and digressing. But if he's a good BS artist, which is what Trump is, he just keeps going. Yeah, the weave, he calls it. The weave is the good brand, and Trump is the king of branding. It's the good branding he's put on just being a BS artist, where you're just talking about all sorts of things. He does the filibuster technique. Exactly, Brandon. So I should also mention, and we're going to play a little bit of the video, that the crowd was stocked with Trump supporters. He had a lot of support in the room. So everything he says, he turns at one point on the interviewer and says, "You've been wrong about everything." The Wall Street Journal, they've been wrong about everything. I mean, look, they were wrong about me. They were wrong about, and then the audience, cheers. So let's, before I get to it, let me just look at this. Martin O'Shaughnessy, I just saw Stacey Abrams mentioned. Need to look at Stacey Abrams in the recent Georgia history. The Dems of Georgia are gun shy. They're not taking anything for granted. Best time to find out you've been purged from the rolls is on the first day. Yeah, well, there's certainly that. Stacey Abrams had the governorship taken from her. She won that election. And the history of Georgia, of disenfranchising. Are we going to get that Georgia candidate on? I thought he's coming back. Is he, yeah? Okay.
Yeah, this week, Bob Christian will be on the show with us.
Great. He's running for Congress in Georgia. Mm-hmm. And he speaks in an unvarnished way about what's going on in Georgia. Sally in Cali with a $20 super chat says, Kamala is up by 2 votes. My husband and I voted today. Wow. There you go. All right.
Woo!
Let the Harris camp know. Good stuff. Sally in Cali, thank you for the support and appreciate your vote. All right. Now, where was I? At
the Mark Thompson Show.
Let's play a little bit of that Trump at the Economic Forum. I see you have some of it in the gate already. So here it is, Tony. This is Trump in Chicago, and I think there's a little mashup that we jacked from CNBC. Go ahead.
And the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, which is a bipartisan outfit, put out some predictions the other day. If you add up all the promises you've made, and your plans would add $7.5 trillion to the debt. Mm-hmm. That's more than twice the total for Vice President Harris. You're on course to push up debt up to 150% of GDP. This is a very business-like audience.
Yeah.
Why should they trust you with that?
Because we're about growth. She's got no growth whatsoever, and we're all about growth. We're going to bring companies back to our country. You look at even today, as I was driving over, I see these empty, old, beautiful, like steel mills and factories that are empty and falling down. Some have been converted to senior citizens' homes, but that's not going to do the trick. And we're going to bring the companies back. We're going to lower taxes still further for companies that are going to make their product in the USA. We're going to protect those companies with strong tariffs, because I'm a believer in tariffs. I'm not sure that you are. I don't think you are, but I congratulate you on your career. But to me, the most beautiful word in the dictionary is tariff, and it's my favorite word. It needs a public relations firm.
Will you commit now to respecting and encouraging a peaceful transfer of power?
Well, you had a peaceful transfer of power.
You had a peaceful transfer of power. You had a peaceful... Come on, President Trump. You had a peaceful transfer of power compared with Venezuela, but it was by far the worst transfer of power for a long time.
The primary scene in Washington was hundreds of thousands, the largest group of people I've ever spoken before, and I've spoken before, and it was love and peace. And some people went to the Capitol. And a lot of strange things happened there. A lot of strange things, with people being waved into the Capitol by police, with people screaming, go in, with that never got into trouble. I don't want to mention names, but you know who they are. A lot of strange things happened. But you had a peaceful, very peaceful. I left the morning that I was supposed to leave. I went to Florida, and you had a very peaceful transfer.
You talked a lot about tariffs. You look at the American economy, 40 million jobs rely on trade. It accounts for 27% of GDP.
Okay.
If you cut that off, that's also going to have an effect on many, many business people here.
Yeah.
Tariffs also have another side. Isn't that something that you have to acknowledge?
No.
You could be plunging America into the biggest trade war since Smoot-Hawley.
But there are no tariffs.
You're going to stop. There are tariffs already.
No, there are no tariffs. All you have to do is build your plant in the United States, and you don't have any tariffs.
People, in a lot of places like this, there are a lot of jobs that rely on foreigners coming here. You're going to basically stop trade with China. You're talking about 60% trade on that, 60% tariffs on that. You're talking, as you said, 100, 200% on things you don't really like. You're also talking about 10, 20% tariffs on the rest of the world. That is going to have a serious effect on the overall economy. And yes, you're going to find some people who will gain from individual tariffs. The overall effect could be massive.
I
in terms of the
agree.
economy.
I agree. It's going to have a massive effect, positive effect. It's going to be a positive, not a negative.
Well,
let me just let me tell
me
you.
an
I know how
example.
committed you are to this, and it must be hard for you to spend 25 years talking about tariffs as being negative, and then have somebody explain to you that you're totally wrong.
The markets are looking at the fact you are making all these promises. Latest one was car loans. You're flooding the thing with giving giveaways.
But we're going to grow.
I was actually quite kind to you. I used 7 trillion. The upper estimate is 15 trillion. People like the Wall Street Journal, who's hardly a communist organization,
Yeah, but you don't know.
They have criticized you on this as well. You are running up enormous debt.
What does the Wall Street Journal know? I'm meeting with them tomorrow. What does the Wall Street Journal know? They've been wrong about everything. So have you, by the way. You've been wrong about
You're trying
everything.
to turn this. You're trying to turn this.
You've been wrong about
No, you're trying to turn this into debate. There are
It's not a
business
debate.
people. There are
But you're
business
wrong.
people.
You've been wrong. You've been wrong all your life on this stuff. The Mercedes-Benz will start building in the United States. And they have a little bit. But you know what they really are? Assembly, like in South Carolina. But they build everything in Germany, and then they assemble it here. They get away with murder because they say, oh, yes, we're building cars. They don't build cars. They take them out of a box and they assemble them. We could have our child do it.
So that's a mashup of Trump with the Bloomberg editor-in-chief, John Micklethwait.
That last comment was about auto workers. He's trying to court the support of auto workers, and he just compared them to children.
Yeah, he really did run on that auto thing for a weird moment because, as you say, he's trying to get these unions to support him. He's already, I think, demonstrated he's an anti-union guy. He celebrated Elon Musk for firing 7,000 workers who are looking to unionize or even just talking about it. And Musk got rid of them. He celebrated that in the conversation he had with Musk. And as you say, in this case, he talks about auto workers basically doing nothing, putting this stuff together that's really assembled overseas. So if you watch the whole thing, which I really did, I watched the lion's share of it, this guy has no conception of economics. It's amazing that he has passed himself off as a successful businessman. And I thought that while the Bloomberg guy seemed as though he was pressing him a bit, he actually let him off the hook. It wasn't as tough as it could be. And even so, Trump struggled. I mean, the tariff thing is completely ridiculous because of the level of the tariffs. There's another portion that we haven't played you. I think I referenced it yesterday in conversation with David K. Johnston. And it relates to the fact that if you start putting tariffs on all foreign goods to the levels that he's talking about, you begin essentially a trade war with the world. And even your allies are now on an adversarial footing with you from an economic standpoint. So, I mean, he was incoherent on questions of policy, questions of the deficit and debt. It was a remarkable thing. And he tried to bring Trump back, and it was, if you watch it, it really exposes Trump as clueless. Now, as I've said, and the reason I said it was to make this point, if you're not really looking at it and you're just kind of, from the standpoint of some sort of substantive evaluation, you're just sort of watching it, Trump sounds confident, you know? And if you're just trusting your gut and going, boy, that guy seems confident, he seems strong about policy, then perhaps you get drunk on that, and that wins the day for Trump. But if you really care about facts, there's no way anything he says checks out. I mean, it's just utterly crap from start to finish. And of course, tariffs is his big thing. And if he doesn't like the country, he increases the tariff on whatever goods are coming in. And when asked about questions that have been raised by the business community about his economic plan, he just seemed ignorant on basic economic principles. And he said that other countries, not the American consumer, would pay for those tariffs. And that's just, of course, we know fundamentally wrong. So, and to be fair to the interviewer, I think on the tariff thing, I have a quote here. He said $3 trillion worth of imports, and you will add tariffs to every single one of them and push up the cost for all those people to buy foreign goods, he said. That's just simple mathematics. And Trump said, I was always good at mathematics. And high tariffs and costs are going to force companies to move production into the United States. It'll take many, many, many years, Micklethwait said. And Trump said that high enough penalties would make the move immediate, as if companies could simply kind of, move their production plants, their orchards, their wineries, their factories into the United States. I mean, it is a global economy, as you all know. We are connected now in ways we've never been in the past. China, we're their number one customer. They don't want an issue with us that would break that relationship. And we trade with China, and we have an interdependency with China, and we don't want that break in our relationship. So while I understand they're adversaries, that economic relationship has to be handled with nuance, and there is no nuance to Trump since there is no fact to Trump, no knowledge. And he goes after the interviewer, you saw the transfer of power thing. You saw and at one point he turned on the interviewer in a more direct way. People told me not to do this, but I said I would. The old kind of Trump dance.
Well, because he doesn't like to be questioned. And one of the things that was happening is when he would try to do his little bob and weave thing, the interviewer would circle back and say, that's not what I asked you. I asked you, and he would put the question to him again. And if he kept going off on a tangent, he'd say, no, let's go back to the issue. And Trump did not like that. He does not like to be controlled or questioned.
Well, he said the Wall Street Journal estimates that your economic proposals would raise the national debt by upward of $7 trillion. And Trump said, what does the Wall Street Journal know? They've been wrong about everything. And so have you, by the way. You've been wrong. And he crossed his arms and sat back in the seat. You've been wrong all your life on this stuff, Trump said. When asked about breaking up Google, Trump totally avoided giving straight answers. And he responded to the Google question by ranting about Virginia's voter rolls. The question is about Google, President Trump, the interviewer asked. Trump then went on a big thing about how Google's unfair to him, doesn't show users any positive stories about Trump. And on the deportation of 11 million undocumented workers and the impact on the American economy, as many undocumented migrants participate in the labor force, Trump immediately went to crime. It came out last week that 125,000 people, Trump said, are horrible criminals at the highest level. And he repeated the false claim of 13,000 undocumented migrants convicted of murder released into the country by the Biden administration. We've had the best numbers, but now we have the worst numbers. And here's the problem. We have some of the worst criminals in the world coming in. And so you can see, again, that wasn't a question about crime. It was about immigrants and the economy. This is an economic forum that he was speaking in front of. Peter Falk used to do a bit, Trevor says, with Johnny Carson where he would give long answers that had nothing to do with questions. It was hilarious. Trump has mastered that ability, and it's disturbing, says Trevor Starr in Hollywood. Yeah. It's indeed the case. Fox is trying to spin this as a masterclass in economics. Thank you, Sarah. I didn't know that. That's kind of wild. Anyway, that's
we have John Rothmann waiting in the wings.
I want to get Rothmann's thoughts on this. As to Trump's total incoherence at that rally he had where he stopped down for 39 minutes and just sort of melted down, I want to speak to John about that. He does so, I would say he shows signs of wear, right? Don't you think Trump shows signs of just not being all with it?
If you just look at all the things he's said in the last couple of weeks, every day there's something more and more concerning. And yesterday it was, I'm the father of IVF. What? Right? Then you had the craziness at the Economic Forum, where he launches into, compares the auto workers to children. He goes to California, says, I won't give you any wildfire relief money. He goes to Detroit, bashes the city in front of a bunch of Detroiters. It's like, are you trying to lose the election? What is happening to you? And then culminating in the weird 40-minute dance-off, and someone faints at his rally, and he says that the guy needs to lose weight in the middle of a medical emergency. It's crazy. Crumbling. He's crumbling.
I can see that he's not going to get your vote, is what I'm getting, Kim. From
maybe not. I don't think so.
That. Yeah.
No.
So
The Mark Thompson Show.
I only have 20 minutes with this guy, so let me get to it right away. He is. Here's a guy's a former KJO talk show host, presidential historian, and an author, lecturer. He's the great John Rothmann, everyone. John, why has the media, it seems as though they've just come around on this a bit. I'm seeing more stories now about his mental acuity slipping and about his age maybe being a factor. But on just substantive things like pulling out of the 60 Minutes interview, pulling now out of the CNBC interview, Donald Trump is doing things that if Kamala Harris did them, she would be lit up like a Christmas tree by the media. Why does the media generally give a pass to Trump?
I don't think they give a pass to him. I think there is a recognition that the people who are going to vote for Donald Trump are going to vote for him no matter what he says, no matter what he does, no matter what mistakes he makes. I listened to this discussion about tariffs. The last time the American people were preoccupied with tariffs was the election of 1888, 1892, and 1896, when tariffs really were the major issue. Nobody understands the tariff question. But you see, for Donald Trump, it doesn't matter. There's only one thing that matters to Donald Trump now, and that's voter turnout. He's talking to his base. Now, you talked at the very beginning about Georgia. Let me indicate to you that the indications are, and nobody knows how people vote, Democrats are turning out in massive numbers in Georgia. If Donald Trump loses Georgia, he's in trouble. Now, I have to tell you, I talked with a gentleman this morning, very smart fellow, who said to me, Donald Trump is going to win. And I said, why? And he said, because of Elon Musk. Elon Musk just pumped $70 million into the Trump campaign. And the question is why? In part because Trump has said, if I win, I'm going to make you part of this economic revival. But the simple fact is that when a candidate for president of the United States of America speaks about the enemy within, it scares the living bejeebers out of me. So in answer to your question, and in short, the media is not prepared to tackle Donald Trump. Oh, one more quick point. It depends what media you listen to. If you listen to CNN or MSNBC, there's a regular challenge to Trump. If you listen to Fox, it's pass after pass after pass. So this is the reality. We don't have.
Well, it's more than just a pass, too, John, isn't it? Then they spin on his behalf.
Of course they do. Of course they do. They have a partisan agenda, and that is to elect Donald Trump as president.
So as you sit now and you look, having spoken to the guy who was going to vote for Trump, by the way, what was the reason that he said he was going to vote for?
Because of Elon Musk. He believes that Elon Musk is a genius, that Elon Musk is responsible for many of the wonderful things that happen in the world and beyond, and that with Elon Musk's support, and he said to me, look, who's the wealthiest man in the world? I said, Elon Musk. And he said, do you think he's going to bet on a losing horse? And the answer is he may have a point. I was at a dinner party the other night, and one of the people there was voting for Trump. I said, why are you voting for Trump? Elon Musk. I mean, it's very simple what is happening now. And
well,
whether or not,
I mean, that's interesting. So you're saying there's sort of a deification of Elon Musk that has spilled over onto Trump. Okay.
Exactly. And Trump is embracing that. And it doesn't matter to most Americans whether Geraldo Rivera, who was one of Trump's close friends, is now backing Harris. It doesn't matter that there are Republicans, overwhelming numbers of Republicans, who, in fact, Kamala Harris is meeting with today, who are supporting Trump, who are supporting Harris. Let me be clear about that. Think about Mark Esper. Think about Mike Pence. Think about John Kelly. Think about John Bolton. think about the people who were the best people in Trump's mind. Not a single one of them is supporting Donald Trump for president. By the way, the ads they're starting to produce now are saying that, but they need to be more emphatic, more clear, more precise.
Mark Milley among them, and Milley, head of the Joint Chiefs, I believe, and he was of the view and is of the view and articulates this view that Trump is a clear national security risk.
A fascist. He called him a fascist. And I think that also is very, very important. But when you couple Pence, Bolton, Kelly, Milley, Esper, these are men who know better than anyone else about Donald Trump. And they are opposing him. It doesn't mean they're supporting Harris, by the way, but it means they're opposing him. And by the way, I listened very carefully to Dick Cheney and Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger and countless numbers of Republicans. But here's the point, Mark. It's all going to depend on voter turnout. You and I know that 3 weeks from now, you and I will be sitting here on a Wednesday after the election. We'll be talking about what happens. We may not know the result. And when Donald Trump every single day casts doubt on the result, one of the things that horrifies me in my speaking, and I speak all over the place, as you know, people are saying to me, can we trust the election? Well, of course they can trust the election. Did you listen on 60 Minutes to the Secretary of State of Pennsylvania, who is a Republican, who said, we're going to have secure elections, just like we did 4 years ago. But Donald Trump continues to raise those doubts. You know what's interesting, Mark? You really want to understand the implications? Now everyone has doubts about the election, not because there's any reason to doubt, but because Donald Trump has made a suggestion and people are willing to listen and people are willing to say, well, if he says it, maybe it's true. So these are the things we better start thinking about. We only have 20 days until November 5th, and already people are voting, and it's going to make a huge difference. So we'll see. Next question.
I think you're right to point to the way in which there has been anxiety around the election essentially manufactured by Trump and the GOP to support the Trump lie. What are you doing? You're looking, you're shuffling through papers or something? Stop it.
Yeah,
okay,
I'm taking a look at something just so I want to see what's going on.
How dare you take a look at something while we're having a conversation?
I'm looking at you on the screen.
Do you know I'm kind of a big deal.
I need you to look right here. Okay. Here's a question to John Rothmann from Joe Johns. I want to know why Democrats should vote for Kamala, knowing 48 million Americans are suffering from hunger and food insecurity due to food inflation. Do you want to take it or do you want me to?
Well, let me start out and tell you, you don't blame Kamala Harris for that, do you? Because nobody blames a vice president for anything. A vice president has no power. It is the president who has the power. And by the way, don't think people didn't suffer when Donald Trump was president. So my answer is you have to make a choice. The question is, who do you want in the White House? Do you want Donald Trump, who is clearly unstable? And I say that regrettably. How do you refute people like General Kelly, General Milley, John Bolton, and of course, Mark Esper and Mike Pence? When you think about it, you haven't had people coming out against Kamala Harris with similar refrains. There has to be a sense. You know, Mark, when you apply for a job, you have to list recommendations, right? Who can people call to check you out? Well, the people who have checked out Donald Trump, the people who have worked for Donald Trump are opposing him. And that should say a lot.
This from Edward Lee, who's sort of a negative Harris person as well, as I recall. What are Kamala's plans? She dodges questions just as much. Let me just say one quick thing. No, she doesn't dodge questions as much. All right, so please, I think that is a false parody between Trump and Harris. But I'll take the question to Brother Rothmann. Go ahead.
The opposition to Kamala Harris is because of her stands. You know where she stands. Donald Trump makes a big thing about where she stands on issues. She's not ambiguous about it. And by the way, she's prepared to appear on Fox. Did you hear Donald Trump refuse to appear on 60 Minutes? I mean, give me a break. There's a very simple reality here, and that is we have a choice between two visions of America. And were I judging this, I would tell you that whatever deficits you may think Kamala Harris has, compare it with Donald Trump, who has a lot more. This is a guy, by the way, who still denies that he lost the election. This is a man who is still arguing over a peaceful transfer of power. This is a man who is still not willing to concede that if he loses the election, he's going to go along with it. I mean, Do you understand the implications of this are profound? And I'm not saying it out of any malice. It's simply his own words, which we can play.
Trump said, this is interesting, again from Joe, Democrat support of Kamala. Why did Kamala say openly she will appoint Republicans to her White House right after Dick Cheney endorsed Kamala? Well, first of all, the timing might have been that. I would challenge whether or not that was actually the timing, like right after Dick Cheney. Dick Cheney had nothing to do with it, but Liz Cheney's certainly been spoken of in relation to maybe having a point.
Can I make the point?
She'll be included
this is
in
not
the cabinet.
unusual.
Go ahead, John.
Franklin Roosevelt put Stimson in as Secretary of War, and he put Frank Knox, who had been Alva Landon's running mate in 36, in as Secretary of the Navy. John F. Kennedy put Robert McNamara in as Secretary of Defense, who was a Republican. C. Douglas Dillon, who had been Under Secretary of State in the Eisenhower administration, a Republican, became Secretary of the Treasury. I want to remind you that Senator Cohen of Maine, who was a Republican, went into a Democratic administration with Bill Clinton. You know, when you talk about these things, thank God we can have bipartisanship. Thank God we can have people who will do that. I don't think that's a political pitch. I think it's simply a reality. You want to govern this country, you have to have bipartisanship to a degree.
I would agree. I mean, I think on some level, this idea somehow, and Joe is clearly, looking for reasons to punch Harris with a knockout punch. And so one of the things, and this is a very GOP thing, how can you have somebody from the other party in your own administration? How could you possibly vote for that person if you're a Democrat, if they want Republicans in there? I think Brother Rothmann is right, that the bipartisanship that Harris is speaking of should be a plus, as long as it's not extremists who you are including in your administration.
Oh, you don't want to include Robert Kennedy Jr. or Tulsi Gabbard, for heaven's sake, and they are the people who are supporting Donald Trump. May I just point out?
Phineas says, are you going to talk with John Rothmann about Trump's Nazi convention at Madison Square Garden, a la Hitler-esque, and the St. Louis Nazi booths popping up? There were a group of people, or there was a group of people, they were there, who were in Nazi regalia, John, and it seemed to be a place where there were a couple of pockets of sort of white power groups present at that Trump rally.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me, but that's not Donald Trump. You want to take down Donald Trump as a politician, you have to go after what he says, where he stands, what he does. And I can tell you that is the answer. When a man speaks about polluting the blood of America, when a man speaks about the underbelly of America, these vicious people that he calls them, the enemy from within, when he repeats that kind of canard, it should alarm you. But I don't compare anybody to Hitler or to the Nazis, just as I believe it is wrong to call Kamala Harris Comrade Kamala, which is what Donald Trump does. And those of you who listen to me on KGO know whenever anybody suggested fascism or communism, I rejected it. I said, judge them by what they say. And Donald Trump should be judged by what he says. And that is the key. That's the thing we have to stick to. We have 20 days in which to understand that. Now, the question of Elon Musk is an important question. He's pumping a lot of money in. But I'm going to tell you, I think there is an undercurrent in America of women who will never vote for Donald Trump because of what he did on Roe v. Wade. And make no mistake, he can weasel it all he wants. Can you imagine Donald Trump claiming to be the father of IVF? Can you imagine?
He did say that.
Ludicrous. Yeah. By the way, he may win the election. And then the question is, what will the condition be of American democracy? That's going to be the real question.
Well, it's interesting, John, if he does win the election and Project 2025 actually is able to be launched even in a half-baked way, it's really looking at a dismantling of the federal government and regulatory agencies. I was looking at the Boar's Head recall. They had that listeria outbreak at which I guess there were multiple deaths, many, many people ill. They go to the plant, and the plant is overrun with all kinds of health violations, all kinds of health code issues. It's an absolute mess. And this is Boarhead's supposed to be the higher end kind of meat and meat processing. So they go there, and the plant is shut down for a couple of weeks, and now it's back up, and then it's shut down, et cetera, and all of these kinds of things. Now, if Project 2025 were actually instituted, there would be no regulatory agency to go check out that boar's head situation. In ways in which we've seen waterways toxified, soil toxified, these agencies that are involved in that regulation, consumer protections, it all goes away. Environmental protections, consumer protections, and protections on food for American consumers, it all goes away under Project 2025.
Right. I did an hour on Project 2025, as some of you are aware. And when we talked about it, I was very specific about what the Project 2025 people say. It's not Trump, it's the Heritage Foundation. But let's remember that Donald Trump's brain trust comes from the Heritage Foundation. They are the ones who pushed the idea of conservative justices on the Supreme Court. They're the ones who gave Trump 3 names, all of whom now sit on the Supreme Court. So I do not underestimate the power of this particular movement. I've mentioned before on your program, but I'll do it one more time. There was a book called The Plot That Failed. It was a similar plot hatched during the Nixon administration, where an administrative presidency became the goal. The only reason it failed was because of Watergate. And I commend people to understand that if Donald Trump wins and this process takes place, this country will, as you have pointed out, and rightly so, be in for a very rough ride. Let me quickly make a comment about the Senate and the House. Looks to me at this moment like the Republicans may take the Senate, but it looks to me that the Democrats may take the House. So let's be clear about that. If the Republicans take the Senate and Donald Trump is president, they will be able to stack the courts in a way like we've never seen before. So I am very concerned about that, and everybody should be. We have 3 justices who are over the age of 70, and any one of them passing away, if Donald Trump is president with the Republican Senate, you're going to see action there. And let me point out to you that John Toon, who may well succeed Mitch McConnell as leader, has said if Harris is president and she sends those kinds of nominees that he doesn't like, and the Republicans control the Senate, he'll kill them. He won't approve them. I mean,
well, you talk about the Supreme Court. I just want to say I have 2 points. One is, first of all, John is so right to talk about the judiciary, because increasingly the legislature, at least the federal legislature, is unable to get anything done. Everything is so hyper-partisan that you just can't get any bills passed. So law begins to take on a kind of a de facto rule. And so you're going to have American culture and society ruled by these court decisions. That's what's happening. So where the courts are and who's in control of them becomes critical. And secondly, it's not just the Supreme Court. As you say,
it's the district courts, it's the appellate courts.
Thank you. So,
and I've repeated this before. Some of you who have listened to me over the years, over many years on the radio, know that I've always said in presidential elections, you're not just voting for a president, you're voting for the person who's going to nominate judges. And that to me is equally important. Who's going to win the election? Who knows? But I can tell you this. I believe, and maybe it's because I want to believe it, Mark, but there is an undercurrent of concern about the idea of a Trump presidency. As somebody pointed out, I think it was Kim, 39 minutes on a stage, swaying to music. Unbelievable. And in a normal situation, can you imagine if Kamala Harris had done that? Can you imagine?
John, I can tell by that comment that you don't like music. I mean, I don't know what.
What?
All I'm trying to say is
I'm just whistling a different tune.
Clearly, yes. Congress is too small. It's regulatory capture. I think this. I don't know why I can't get to that. Congress is so small. It is regulatory captured. I would say this about regulatory capture. We've talked about it. I used to talk about it on KGO all the time. And it's a real thing, and it's a real problem. But that does not mean Congress, by the way, the idea that they could handle any sort of regulation is laughable. They truly are captured by, as was suggested by Tom Hartman, who was here the other day as a guest. They should wear those jackets that NASCAR drivers wear, where they just have the lobby money on as patches on their jacket, because they are all, not all of them, but they are as an institution owned by their wealthy donors. But that said, it is still critical that these regulatory agencies staffed with scientists and experts in the field, that they exist and continue to try anyway to do the people's work.
Well, I mean, you already know that when Donald Trump is president, you can't talk about global warming, which is such a clear and present danger. Look, Lech Walesa, the Solidarity leader who served as president of Poland, made a statement the other day. He said that a Trump victory would be a misfortune for the world. I believe that to be absolutely true. And we need to remember that. It's not just us. Can you imagine what the Ukrainians are going through now? If Trump wins the election, American aid for Ukraine will virtually stop. We know that because J.D. Vance, the nominee for vice president of the United States, who spread all these malicious rumors about cats and dogs and Haitians, because J.D. Vance has never voted for anything for the Ukraine. We know that because Donald Trump is saying he will impose a solution. These are the facts, Mark. This is not speculation. And so we should be worried about a Trump victory. And that's why the Democrats are going to have to turn out the vote as we've never turned it out before. And I say we. Remember, I was once a Republican. I was once on Richard Nixon's staff. I am not a left-wing lunatic, but I am somebody who loves.
You are a lunatic, though, wouldn't you say that, John? You're just not left-wing
only
anymore.
when I appear with you on the Mark Thompson program.
All right, now listen. I think you're plenty loony, over the legal limit. Now, what I would say to you, John Rothmann, is that we have no more time to continue this conversation.
Outrageous.
I know I have a distinguished professor in his own right coming on who's just written a really interesting book. I want you to listen because it is about the presidency and about the Constitution, and I think you'll find it instructive.
Can I quickly point out a question you can ask him? The president who was most accused of stretching the Constitution was Franklin D. Roosevelt, who is now ranked as one of our greatest presidents. Remember, he tried to pack the Supreme Court. He tried to get around Congress. He tried to purge Congress. You can remember all of those things in history. So I'll be interested. I'll be listening avidly. What's the title of the book, Mark?
It is 5 Presidents. Let me just see. What was it? The actual, I don't want to blow the title, but it's The Presidents and the People, 5 Leaders Who Threatened Democracy and the Citizens Who Fought to Defend it.
I'm going to order it right this minute.
We ought to keep Rothmann around for some of this interview. You know what I mean?
I'll
Kim,
stay. I'm happy to stay and be quiet.
You know what? Can I do that, Kim? I think I can do that. I can make this audible because I feel like...
Yeah, I think you can do that.
I think, it is an odd way in which your Venn diagrams overlap, you and Corey Brettschneider. So Corey will be around in a moment. So why don't you take that moment and have a coffee or something, and he'll be along in just a couple of seconds.
What kind of coffee would you recommend?
It's Coachella Valley coffee, John, and I'm glad you asked because I have a cup of it here. We should send you some, and I'm sorry that we haven't already, but...
It's all right. I'm happy to just be here with you, Mark. It's good enough. And we're glad to put in a
CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. Yes. I may take some with me when I go to the fall show in San Francisco. Hey, if you want to come meet us at the fall show, John, it's at Fort Mason, right there at the pavilion at Fort Mason. Beautiful, right there on the bay. That's a short Uber ride for you.
When is that?
It starts tomorrow and goes through Sunday. Fall show is October 17th, which is tomorrow.
And you will
through
be
October
there?
20th. I will be there along with Courtney, whom you've never met.
No.
And we are really looking forward to this. And you get tickets at eventbrite.com, B-R-I-T-E, of course, eventbrite.com. Use our discount code MARK in capital letters, M-A-R-K. But you can show up at the door there at the San Francisco Fall Show at Fort Mason and just say MARK, and they will give you the 25% discount. You get 25% off the ticket. It's not even $20, I don't think, once the discount goes through.
Gee,
so it's not expensive.
You're just wonderful. I mean,
and what I'm going to do for
coffee.
you, if you come meet us, you, John Rothmann, I'll pay for your ticket.
What?
I know, and I'm doing a podcast. I don't have any money. So I'm...
All right, so I'm sticking around for another hour. And
that's right.
I will listen carefully.
Not even for another hour, just for this next conversation with Corey Brettschneider.
You don't have to include me. I'm listening because it's so interesting.
Elise Inzerio, thank you, first of all, for John Rothmann. How about it, everybody? Thank you. All right, John. Yeah.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Elise, I was reading Elise. Can we get Elise back? Whimsical coffee drinking music. Yes, whimsical coffee drinking music is... the coin of the realm. I love it. It's just, well, it just makes, I only get it with Coachella Valley coffee, but Go to their website, CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. That discount code is MARK-T, and you get 10% off anything on the site. Antari says the Federalist Society goal is to legislate through the courts by using the Senate supermajority to block all remedies. Instead of voting policy down, They're using the courts to dismantle liberty. I completely agree with that. I think that's absolutely right. Thanks, Antares, and thanks for the super chat. As I was saying, the inability of Congress to get any kind of legislation through that really has a positive effect on American society, you end up with the courts essentially influencing the culture and taking control of the legal wheel that steers American society. Article 3, Section 1 of the Constitution gives Congress the authority to change the size of the Supreme Court. Congress has used that authority 7 times before. Okay, now when you mention Constitution, I have to bring in a distinguished professor of constitutional law. This guy, Professor Brown University, his new book is The Presidents and the People, 5 Leaders Who Threatened Democracy and the Citizens Who Fought to Defend It. Put it together for the great Corey Brettschneider. So excited. Hello, sir. How are you?
Hi, Mark. Great to see you. Looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, me as well. We're gonna fold our colleague John Rothmann here in a second. It was sort of a spur of the moment thing because we were talking already about the Constitution, presidents. He'd mentioned FDR in the context of the Constitution and the stressing of the Constitution, even as FDR is celebrated. Anyway, I'm going to bring him on in a moment. But can you handle that last question? What was it? It was related to, where is it? Did we get rid of it already? It was from Rich. And there it is. Article 3, Section 1 of the Constitution gives Congress the authority to change the size of the Supreme Court. This is about expanding the court, what could be called packing the court. Congress has used that authority 7 times before. This often comes up. The Supreme Court, now so one-sided with decisions that don't really reflect, it would seem, the flavor of American society today. Alt-right radical judges now having taken control of the Supreme Court. What's involved and how realistic is it to expand that court?
Well, it's absolutely right that the number of 9, which is the current number, of course, is not set by the Constitution, that it's statutory. So there could be a change in the law passed by Congress. And then you still, of course, would have to get the new justices or the additional justices through the process of confirmation. But it is possible. I mean, it sounds like you might have been talking about this before, but the idea of explicitly packing the court is usually a reference to something that FDR considered. And when you see what the stakes that FDR was against, you understand why he was considering it. The Supreme Court was really striking down the most basic parts of the New Deal to do, for instance, with things like minimum wage and maximum hours and regulation of labor. In fact, the very right of the National Labor Relations Board to exist and to certify unions. So as the court was blocking all of this, he threatened it. Now, he didn't come through and actually do it, but that was enough. It led in part, and there's debate about what it was specifically, but one factor certainly, I think, was this threat to pack. But it also was his really increasing political power that the court backed down. And so it really went from blocking the New Deal through its idea of limited government power, limited power in particular of Congress, to allowing all sorts of pieces of legislation through. So even the threat worked without doing it. And it's why it's certainly on the table now as we start to think of this really horror show of opinions that has come through the court. And my book in particular came out the day after the court's immunity decision. So for a book about the dangers of executive power, and specifically it ends with the idea that we really never recovered from the criminal presidency of Richard Nixon, and that his ideas of a president being above the law are the legacy of that administration rather than a recovery. That case really is my argument on steroids. It's, because it's not just about immunity of sitting presidents, a dangerous idea, but immunity of even former presidents, at least when it comes to their most dangerous actions, those of official duty.
Again, Corey Brettschneider's book is The Presidents and the People, 5 Leaders Who Threatened Democracy and the Citizens Who Fought to Defend It. I want to put a button on this idea about the Supreme Court quickly, then I'll bring in Brother Rothmann to join us in this conversation, because it was followed up, that question, in our chat by this. Sarah says, just want your opinion. Could Biden have expanded the Supreme Court before Dobbs? This was a question that was kicked around a lot as Biden took office, because we knew that there were some pretty onerous decisions coming down. Speak to the realities regarding what Biden could have done, threatened to do, et cetera.
Yeah, it's not a unilateral thing. He couldn't just add justices, but through legislation that he would sign, the court's number could be expanded. And then, of course, there's a nomination process, and there has to be confirmation from the Senate. So it would have been possible. And generally, I have to say on this idea of Biden, in many ways, it was an important presidency. There was legislation, of course, that put a serious dent in childhood poverty. But when it comes to the issue that I'm most concerned with in the book of recovering the idea that no person, not even a president, is above the law, and the general idea of the rule of law applied equally, an idea we failed to see applied in the Nixon case, he didn't do enough to restore a constitutional order. And we see that not just in the immunity case, but also in the stripping of the right to an abortion in the Dobbs case. And I think there really wasn't enough attention to how dire things were with the Supreme Court. Now, he's done things, he's spoken out, but,
What would you have liked to have seen him do, Corey? What could he do?
Well, one thing he could have done initially is revoke immediately the executive policy of the Department of Justice that says that no sitting president could be indicted. And he still could do that tomorrow. But I think there was a worry within that White House of not focusing on these issues, of not allowing I think all presidents really protect themselves and not wanting to allow, for instance, a unfounded prosecution of himself. And then in general, putting on the agenda, I've been talking for some time, and he was aware certainly of the danger of the court saying that sitting presidents were immune and that former presidents were immune. So that he could have been preemptive in the same way that your listener is talking about being preemptive in protecting the right to an abortion. The other thing he certainly could have done specifically on abortion is early on made a primary goal, the national protection of the right to an abortion through legislation. And what would have happened if that would have been on the books is Dobbs wouldn't have mattered because it already would have been protected from statute. It's only because the only protection for the national right to an abortion was through the Supreme Court that the Dobbs opinion was so radical. So I think what I'm hearing from your listeners, I emphatically agree with, that there really had to be a role for the president in recovering our constitutional values in the face of a court that was assaulting them. And one thing I'm arguing in the book is, even though we didn't recover from Nixon, we've seen presidents in the past react to threats to democracy, threats to our basic rights, by seeing their presidencies as restorations of the democratic ideas of a constitution, of we the people. And did I see that with Biden? He's certainly no Trump, and I don't want to underestimate how important it was that he won that election. But we haven't done enough to shore up our democracy, and certainly those two areas that we've been talking about, abortion and the danger of a president above the law, are two of the big ones.
I want to bring in John Rothmann, who is a professor of presidential history and a lecturer, former colleague at KGO. John, thank you. Chime in as necessary. I thought it was provocative what John had said. We kind of started our conversation with Corey with regard to your question, John, about FDR, or your comment about FDR, who had sort of is now lionized, of course, but you sort of noted that at the time he was doing things that were really contested. I mean, strongly contested. Wasn't that your point, John Rothmann? Can John hear us or not?
Yes,
no.
I can hear you now. You came back. Okay. Corey, I'm going to order your book as soon as we're finished.
Thank you, John.
Absolutely right on, spot on. And of course, I mentioned FDR and the court packing attempt in 1937, legislation that was put before the Congress and which was defeated because the Democrats who objected and the conservative Republicans stopped it. But I'm looking forward to reading your book, particularly interested in your observation about Richard Nixon, his very famous statement in the David Frost interview that if a president does it, it's not against the law. And of course, that is horrific. And I can say that as somebody who worked for Richard Nixon.
He, the way I argue it in the book is that sometimes that statement to Frost in the interview is sort of seen as a gotcha moment, that he sort of lost his cool and said this wild thing. And one thing I'm really trying to show in the book is that that isn't the case at all in the interview, or if you look at his statements throughout his presidency, that he really believes that America is in a civil war with people like Daniel Ellsberg, who he calls the main ball when it comes to his enemies, and that, like Lincoln, actually, that he's got this extraordinary power to really commit any act. And his argument is that he's immune in doing so. And even so much so that he can make this crude statement that when a president does it, it's not illegal. Now, if you look at what the court's done, it's really vindicated that wild idea. But it was, like many of the presidents who I argue have threatened democracy, not a spur of the moment emotional thing. It was based in who's a lawyer and in an idea of the presidency. And part of what I tell too in the book is the idea that far from being uncontested, that the grand jury at that moment did try to indict him. And we know now from the records that have been revealed that there was a vote actually to do so.
Unindicted co-conspirator.
Well, in U.S. versus Nixon, he's named an unindicted co-conspirator. But as you'll see, the argument, the story, more untold story that I tell in the book is that there was a grand jury, two of the grand jurors who I interviewed, who in a straw poll voted to indict the president of the United States, that they had seen the extent of his crimes. And Jaworski, the story that I tell, stopped the indictment. Now, how did he do it? First of all, he said he wouldn't agree. He wouldn't sign on. And he warned, too, that if they went forward, Elaine Edlund, for instance, a legal secretary, talks about how many of them raised two hands in their enthusiasm. And Vladimir Krgelj, the foreperson who brought the grand jury together, was insistent in a simple principle that if a president commits a crime, they should be indicted, former president or sitting president. And anyway, the story I tell in the book is that what Jaworski did is he said to them, look, if you do this, the president is going to surround the White House with military, and he's going to engage in a kind of self-coup to protect himself from the indictment. And he used that argument to say, please delay. And the continued story I tell is they basically essentially made a deal that the grand jury handed off the information to Congress and the roadmap with the hope that there would be impeachment proceedings. They agreed in court to pursue the case that you just mentioned, U.S. versus Nixon, to get the remaining tapes. But the main point was, after he stepped down, that there would be an indictment. So after not the full House, but the House of Representatives votes articles of impeachment, and after the tapes in U.S. versus Nixon are handed over, Krgelj comes back to Jaworski and says, okay, it's time to indict the sitting president. We made a deal. And rather than move forward, what Jaworski does, partly in discussion with Philip Lacavara, who I interviewed for the book, his deputy, is Lacavara thought just to suss out whether or not the pardon was coming. But it looks from the sequence that soon after he meets with Haig, that the pardon comes. So the point in the book is, unlike these arguments, I make the argument we faced a threat to democracy from Adams, and we recovered at the behest of recovery presidents like Jefferson and Madison, or Buchanan, that we recovered from Lincoln and Grant. With Nixon, we really never recovered, and the pardon is a huge, huge reason for that.
Can I ask you a quick question? I want your reflection on the Supreme Court decision relative to former presidents and how you view Donald Trump in terms of the context if he goes back to the White House. What are the implications?
I mean, I think it is, some legal commentators have been talking about that there's hyperbole saying that this places a president above the law. And they do what law professors often do. They say it's presumptive, the immunity, it's only official duties as opposed to unofficials. I hold a totally different view, which is that it really does place a president above the law. And if you think of that story I just told about Nixon surrounding the White House with military, that's official duty. Everything Nixon was arguing was official duty. And so that, to me, is not, in far from making me less worried, it makes me more worried. It takes the president's core powers when they're most dangerous and immunizes them from any prosecution. So what's the way that we could hold presidents accountable? I tell the story in the book of, at the founding, Patrick Henry saying, look, this Constitution's not going to work because the traditional checks on power, the judiciary, the impeachment power, are not going to stop. They might stop a sort of bad president, but they're not going to stop a criminal president. That's how he puts it. And we're really at that point of seeing that that's true.
I just want to interject what worried me, and I've pointed this out to people. If the Supreme Court decision that we now have had been applied to Richard Nixon, we never would have heard the tape of June 23rd, the smoking gun tape. Nixon and Haldeman would have gotten away with it. So I'm going to tell you, and I want everybody to know, so I'm going to continue with you. I'm ordering your book. I can't wait to read it. It's purely fantastic, and I want to thank you for taking the time to write it, and I think it's very timely.
Thanks so much, John.
What's interesting to me, Corey, is, and it's oftentimes the case with us Americans. I'll just use myself as in this case. I'm sort of unaware of some of the specifics about what you had made a glancing reference to, which was sort of the beginnings of this nation and the early presidents and how they were involved in trying to reshape the government, if you will, and reshape the office of the presidency. You mentioned John Adams. You spent some time in the book talking about John Adams. Give me a second on that. These early guys who are involved with this new idea of the president of the United States.
Yeah, I mean, I think that part of the trust in the office that many of the framers had is they knew George Washington was going to be the first president. He was presiding over the Constitutional Convention, and he wasn't somebody that struck them as hell-bent on power or autocracy in any way. And in fact, he says in his second inaugural, the shortest ever given, 135 words, I just took the oath of office. It commits me to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution. If I violate it, I want the people assembled to subject me to upbraidings, or if I really violate it, subject me to constitutional punishment. But when there's a transition to the second president, to John Adams, my argument is it's completely the opposite idea. And even Adams' self-understanding, he's McCullough and others praise him for being very learned. He is learned, but when you look at what his learning involves, he thinks there's an analogy between the power of the president and the power of a constitutional monarch. In fact, he thinks the constitutional monarch in England is too limited in his power. So when he faces threats in the form of newspaper editors criticizing him, he doesn't think that's protected speech, even though the First Amendment's been passed. And in fact, he signs the Sedition Act, which, and just to show you what it is, which is a shutdown of the opposition party, it makes it a crime to criticize the president of the United States, but it remains perfectly legal to criticize the vice president. Now, why would they do that? It's because the vice president, Thomas Jefferson, is a member of the opposition party. So it's even in its text, it's gerrymandered to shut down the opposition. And those who are targeted, including a sitting congressman of the opposition party, Matthew Leon from Vermont, and newspaper editors who are Adams' fiercest critics. And this isn't, the criticism is about policy, and yet he doesn't want to allow it. And it's a mix of, he is thin-skinned, as I said, but it is also based in this idea that in England, the king can't be criticized. There's sedition. And they think that's consistent with the First Amendment. Now, the reason he doesn't get away with it is not that he goes to court, to continue our last conversation. In fact, Samuel Chase, a sitting Supreme Court justice, lobbies for these acts and sits on the trial of Thomas Cooper, one of the editors who's convicted on them, and refuses to even allow him to raise the issue of free speech. So it becomes politics, not through the court, that the newspaper editors use their own trials as a way of putting Adams on trial. And they use in particular the election of 1800, and they make it, this is going to sound familiar, a referendum on democracy, to say, look, it's autocracy or democracy. And they're really not exaggerating. It is true. If Adams would have won that election, there would not have been an opposition party in the way that we think of today.
It's so interesting, too, that we look back to Adams as a founding father, and there's just, we have varnished the history with this notion of founding father, as though there's a certain deification of those, the handful that were involved in the founding of the nation. And you really point up, this particular founding father had a lot of serious flaws. And then I want to skip ahead, because you also talk about Woodrow Wilson, and Woodrow Wilson, bad guy. And I mean, I understand, presidents can be a mix of good and bad, but wow, Wilson really tried to do things with his power that really are just loathsome, I think. And you go into some detail in the book about it.
Yeah, and again, like Adams and Wilson share something in common, aside from their assault on democracy, which I'll talk about in a second, which is that they're regarded in their own time as the premier constitutional thinkers of the moment. That's certainly true of Adams, and in fact, he's still lauded by McCullough and others for that. And Wilson, professor of politics at Princeton, teacher of constitutional law and comparative constitutional law, president of Princeton. He really has all of these sort of high credentials. But yet what I did is I went into the archives in Princeton, and unbelievably, the librarian had the foresight at the time when he was elected governor to collect all the student notebooks. And so in these notebooks, you get the notes of what he was saying in class and what his general philosophy is. And what that turns out to be is, well, very disturbing. He thinks, for instance, that unlike Washington, what I described, that the president really has a unique obligation in American politics to pursue national efficiency beyond the reach and power of the other two branches. And that's not the disturbing part. The disturbing part is that he identifies one thing really as in the opposition to national efficiency, and that's what he calls friction. And what does he mean by friction? He means integration. And so he really sees the national opposition. He's not, as I say in the book, certainly not the first white supremacist president, but he is the first white nationalist president, in meaning the spread of segregation that he seeks nationally. He does that partly through the segregation of the federal government, resegregation of the federal government, through his rhetoric.
Speak to that, because this is like we're getting comments like this. How bad was Wilson? Example. Speak to that, the federal government thing that he actually did.
The federal government was, for instance, the post office we can take first, which is one of the most important parts of the federal government at that time. And what Wilson is really doing is not announcing it, but he certainly, and we know this is at his direction, and I'm going to tell you how we know in part in a second, demanding the segregation of these offices and firing or demoting black civil servants who had been advanced in the civil service before with real impact on their lives. Now, that's been rediscovered recently, but at the time, the theme of the book, of course, is in the Adams case, it's the newspaper editors who fight back and prevail upon recovery presidents, Jefferson and Madison, to put the Constitution back. In the case of Wilson, the opposition comes from, I profiled two people in particular, the newspaper editor William Monroe Trotter from Boston and Ida B. Wells, the anti-lynching activist, and they go to Wilson and they call him out precisely for what I'm talking about. And we know this because Trotter was smart enough to leak the transcript of what happened in the meeting. But what's incredible about the meeting is he calls him out not just for this action. He says, look, what you're doing in this act of segregation is you're taking this regional idea of segregation and seeking to make that the philosophy of the national government. And Wilson says, I'm doing no such thing, that all I'm doing is trying to create efficiency. And if you see anything in what I'm doing, second-class citizenship, that's on you. He's really repeating the lie of Plessy versus Ferguson. And when Trotter and Wells push back, he says an amazing thing to them, given what I just told you about his lecture notes. He says, you're creating friction. He really sees even the challenge to him in the Oval Office and the challenge to the idea that the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment might be inconsistent with the spread of segregation as the creation of friction. And, you know, who are these people to oppose me, these great civil rights heroes? He doesn't see them that way. And so that's, you know, one of the main examples. But I talked too about his rhetoric, how even in the midst of Red Summer, he not only during a Washington, D.C. riot refuses to call out any troops to quell the rioting. I shouldn't call it a riot. It's really a massacre of Black Americans. But he's using language that's inflammatory about, in the midst of this violence, about the disloyalty of what he calls hyphenated Americans, including Black Americans, and really suggesting that any opposition to him is disloyalty to America. So in many ways, he really reflects Trump, and in some ways he goes beyond it. Not even Trump has tried to resegregate the federal government, for instance.
The book is fascinating, and you've broken it into, you know, these five portions. Let's show the book cover again, will you, Tony? That's great. Again, it's the presidents and the people, 5 leaders who threatened democracy and the citizens who fought to defend it. It's interesting, and we skip ahead, and in the chat I see a lot of this, you know, what can we do right now? And the citizens who fought to defend it, which is part of the title of your book, is no small part of what you talk about, both in our history and in our contemporary history that we're making now. I wonder if you could spend a moment on that. I mean, this is, are we limited to the vote and activism. Where are we in terms of trying to push back this rise of autocratic instincts on the part of our leaders?
Great, and thanks for that question, which really opens up the reason why I wrote the book. It's not a book just about threats to democracy, and it is a book in part about how we've recovered with the help of subsequent recovery presidents. But the mechanism in each of these recoveries, the recovery from the Sedition Act and the shutdown of the opposition party in Adams, and I'll talk too about the recovery from Buchanan and the lobbying of the Supreme Court in the Dred Scott case to deny all rights, legal personhood, period, to Black Americans throughout the country. The recovery from Wilson that I discussed. The way that those happen is in a really specific way in each of the themes, and it's not just elections; it's citizens reclaiming a democratic idea of the Constitution and organizing around it, so that when the recovery happens, when the threat president is defeated, autocratic presidents really are defeated, or those with that ambition, there's an agenda, an idea of what that recovery will look like. So we've been talking, for instance, about the newspaper editors who fought back against Adams. And when Jefferson is elected and he says, we're all Federalists, we're all Republicans, one of the most famous lines in American presidential history, he's really sending the signal, I'm going to honor this resistance to the Sedition Act. And, Jefferson is far from a perfect president, not just, of course, on the issue of slavery, but he does secretly seek the prosecution of his enemies while he's publicly proclaiming to protect speech. But the Sedition Act doesn't come back. He does pardon the editors. But it's really the Madison presidency, I argue, where you see this heroic refusal to pass a new Sedition Act to shut down the opposition Federalist Party. And it's because of the ideas, not just the election of 1800, but the ideas that are bigger than any political party, that Madison sees himself as beholden to this idea of free speech, even in the midst of war. So he honors the opposition party by inviting people to the White House, including a Federalist newspaper editor named Hanson. The hero of the book are these various citizens who push back, but there's really one chief hero, and he's the one I think that we can look to for true inspiration, and that's Frederick Douglass. During the Buchanan presidency, the court is considering the possibility of deciding this case, Dred Scott, in a way that will result in a catastrophe for Black Americans throughout the country. And in the midst of it, what Buchanan does is publicly he says, I'm neutral. I trust the court. They're the interpreters of the Constitution. And privately, he lobbies for the most evil, and I use that word assuredly, it is the most evil decision in American history at the behest of Buchanan. And it did strip Black Americans of all rights, citizenship, even under the federal Constitution. Now, what do you do? And I think some citizens are going to relate to this possibility at the time, right now, when we think about what we can do. And that was William Lloyd Garrison said, we need to scrap this Constitution altogether. This case is evil, and it reveals an evil Constitution at its base. And Douglass did something more brilliant, in my opinion, the thing that we should follow. He said, look, if you read the Constitution in the right way, not the way Buchanan or the court is reading it, you can see a devotion to democracy. We the people, it says, not we the white people. It bans the corruption of blood, the idea that you can inherit the punishments and crimes of parents. What is that, he says, but an anti-slavery principle? And most importantly, he returns to the Declaration of Independence. He says the idea of equality in the Declaration, like the preamble, is not limited and has to apply to the entire Constitution. And he uses those ideas with the backing of his constituency. Democratic constitutional constituency is the phrase I use in the book to describe this process, to put his weight between. Originally, Lincoln is far from his position. He thinks slavery is protected within the states. He thinks that the Fugitive Slave Act is wrong but has to be enforced. But with Douglass prevailing on him, there's an effort he changes his mind. By the time of Gettysburg, the idea that the war is sanctified by opposition to slavery comes from Douglass. But really, these things take time, and it's in the Grant presidency and the prosecution of more than 1,000 white terrorists around the country that we really see Douglass's ideas come to life. So the point of these stories, telling them so in depth, as I do in the book, is it's not just that we can prevail over Trump's threat to democracy. It's that we have prevailed in equally worrying times. And we've done so with a focus and an agenda that really thinks about not just policy, but recovery of fundamental constitutional themes. And that's why, when we started with the immunity case, that's not a small thing, recovering the idea that no person, even a president, is above the law. That's the thing I think we need to do going forward.
It's yeah, I'll get to this in a second, John. This question, John Watson. But what I would, yeah, okay, I'll get to that right now. I'm sorry, I see that our time is short. But I see. I just want to make this quick aside. So much overlap with. By the way, all your writings really are so applicable to this time that we're in. Even as they look back at history, there's so much applicability to this moment in time. And so it is with the presidential immunity. You couldn't find something that is more on target. Now to the question John had in the chat. In your guest's opinion, who was the worst U.S. president? You always get this, is Trump the worst? Was right. Bush the worst because of Iraq? Was Wilson the worst because he was so prejudiced and bigoted, et cetera? And so on. Can you speak to, give us your worst three if you want.
Yeah. I mean, I guess what I would say is that I think that the best and worst discussion that you often get about presidents, I'm trying to do something that's a little different, which is to reframe it and to talk about criteria, and the criteria in particular of the oath of office, to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution. And then I'm getting even a little complicated in saying it's not any Constitution, it's a democratic idea of we the people. And so that's really the way that I want to measure whether presidents have done the job or not. It's not about whether they were good or bad people. It's about whether or not they protected or threatened democracy. And so, take Adams, for instance, who is seen in many ways for good reason as a nice person. He wasn't a criminal. But, from the lens that I'm offering, he almost destroyed the very possibility of multi-party democracy. So, I think that's what I'm really doing, is getting us to reshape these questions around the idea of defenses of not just the oath, but the democratic understanding of the Constitution.
Yeah, it's interesting, too. We have a recency bias, don't you think, John Rothmann? We always just kind of think that the guy we're living through right now is the worst, and yet that's why I think your book's so great. There's a look back at some of this other stuff that led us to this point in history. Rothmann, I'm going to excuse the witness if you have anything in closing.
No, I'm going to order the book right away, Corey. I'm very impressed, and 3 cheers for what you've done.
Thanks so much.
The presidents and the people, 5 leaders who threatened democracy and the citizens who fought to defend it. By the way, that Frederick Douglass isn't on the $20 bill instead of Andrew effing Jackson is an absolute grotesque crime. It is unbelievable that despicable president, Andrew Jackson, who slaughtered, he has all that blood on his hands of Native Americans, that he's on the $20 bill and not Frederick Douglass, this great American. I mean, arguably the greatest American.
Yeah, as I've been doing various media, and I say something like this in the book, but I've been saying the true founder of American democracy is Frederick Douglass. Now, you might think, well, he didn't live in the 18th century at the time the Constitution's written, but the reason I think of him as the true founder of American democracy is he is clearly the first and clearest in teaching us how to read that document. And the fact that he doesn't want to jettison it doesn't mean that he reads it the way that the pro-slavery forces might have in the 18th century, for instance, from South Carolina. And so that idea of we the people as a principle, that's what he teaches us. And so, if I had to choose one founder of American democracy, he's it.
Bravo. Corey,
you should point out, if I can, that Douglass attended Lincoln's inauguration, and Lincoln valued what he said.
Yeah, well, in the book, as you'll see, John, because I know it's coming in the next 24 hours, I talk in depth about how it's not just that these were ideas, that Douglass sat there with Lincoln twice and prevailed on him to adopt his idea of the Constitution. And he used stories, including the fact that his 2 sons were fighting in the Union Army, to talk about the issue of equal pay, and then to broaden it, to say, really, you have to think of the Constitution not as a legalistic document, but as a moral one. And so when Lincoln gives his famous speech at Gettysburg, government, by, for, and of the people, that in many ways it's him, of course, but he's channeling the ideas, I think, that Douglass has brought him around to.
There's a lot of Frederick Douglass in your book, and I think that speaks so well for the book itself. So there'll be a link to buy the book under this video and under this live podcast as well. The Presidents and the People, 5 leaders who threatened democracy and the citizens who fought to defend it. Corey Brettschneider, don't wait we want you in between books also. So please come visit again, man. Always love seeing you and talking with you.
Thank you both.
Yeah.
Love the
Thanks,
conversation.
guys.
Thanks so much, and thanks for reading it.
Yeah, good stuff. Corey Brett Schneider. Bye, guys.
The Mark Thompson Show.
It was great. I loved it.
How would you handle this? We could try ignoring it, sir.
Morning.
You cannot say you love your country.
Where are my weed smokers at?
Stay at home and get baked.
Yeah, that is a great guy, and you must get his book. Tony, please put that link in under the video. I can't hear you, Tony, but if you unmute, I'm sure you're saying you're going to do that.
I said I've been throwing it in chat the whole time. It's been cycling in there. So
great.
And
So
I'll have it also. I'll throw a link in today's description as well. And in
I'd
the
like to
breakout.
have Professor Brett Schneider back on the show like periodically. He was really interesting.
That's what I was saying.
Yeah.
You know, that I don't want him only when he has books. I want him in between books. So and it's a good read. It's a very, accessible read. So, guys, I have to now catch a flight. Courtney was not feeling well yesterday, so we put off the flight to today. So I must leave the show a little bit early. Kim's got a lot of good content. She may even do some news. I don't know what your plan is between now and the end of the 2 hours that is this show, but I know it's going to be good. I'll see everybody who I hope will turn out for the San Francisco Fall Show. Again, it's at Fort Mason, and you get our discount code 25% off, and it's not even, I think it's $20 a ticket. So you get all of this design and these lectures and a pop-up restaurant from Izzy's and a bar and all these things, and you get it all for the $20 price, and it's right there on the water. And please do say hi. If you see me there, if you see Courtney, please do say hello. I would love to see you. So our discount code is MARK, all capital letters, M-A-R-K, and you can order tickets at eventbrite.com or sffallshow.org. And we're looking forward to a great couple of days in San Francisco. We'll be live from there. I'll set up a little rig in the hotel room, so we'll have everything going. So get it going. Kim, you rock. Thank you.
Safe travels.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, Tony, let's do a little news. I think we can make it happen. Yeah, I've got some great stories, some stories that I think are really important to share today. So I'm going to pop a video in the VCR. No, I'm not doing that. No videos. We're going to do some news right now on the Mark Thompson Show. On the Mark Thompson Show, I'm Kim McAllister. This report is sponsored by CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. There are less than 3 weeks until Election Day. Former President Trump appeared on Fox News in a town hall in front of an all-female audience taped in Georgia yesterday. Today, he's set to be in Miami to take part in another town hall, this one for Univision. Meanwhile, Vice President Kamala Harris is sitting down for an interview with Bret Baier that will air this evening on Fox News, and she'll also hold a campaign event in Pennsylvania. FEMA is back to work in North Carolina after receiving alleged threats to its employees. Administrator Deanne Criswell said FEMA was back to normal operations in the field in a Tuesday news briefing. Ashe County Sheriff said over the weekend the agency's Mountain Region staff were the target of threats. Criswell said she takes the threats very seriously and the safety of the responders will remain a priority. Jimmy Carter has cast his ballot for the 2024 election. If you recall, Tony, I hear your voice. If you recall, President Carter said that he wanted to at least stay alive long enough to cast his vote, according to family members, and that has happened. The Carter Center confirming the news Wednesday. His grandson, again, previously said he would vote for Vice President Harris and doesn't believe former President Trump should be in the White House ever again. A search is underway now for 2 Navy crew members after their fighter jet crashed near Mount Rainier in Washington state. The EA-18G Growler aircraft went down yesterday during a routine training flight with multiple search and rescue assets now being deployed. The missing crew members are part of the Electronic Attack Squadron 130. Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass has issued an executive directive to clean up the city before the 2028 Summer Olympics. The directive instructs various divisions to enhance infrastructure and city services, repair streets, clean up the parks. They need a head start on cleaning up. It's going to take a while. Mayor says this is part of her larger goal to make Los Angeles more livable leading up to the city taking the international stage when it hosts the Summer Olympics and the Summer Games, right? Schools and businesses across the state of California are preparing to drop and cover because tomorrow is the Great California Shakeout. Cell phones will go off at 10:17 a.m. Pacific time with an earthquake warning, urging everyone to respond as if it were the real thing. More than 10 million people took part in the safety drill last year. This one marks the 35th anniversary of the 6.9 Loma Prieta earthquake, which toppled more than 1,000 homes. So again, tomorrow, the Great California Shakeout, 10:17 a.m. Pacific. Get ready, as they say. Or do they say that? I don't know. Applications are open to Californians to make their homes safer against earthquakes. Speaking of which, the state is offering grants of up to $13,000 toward a retrofit. It's an incentive to avoid houses possibly collapsing. Houses must be 1 or 2 story with living spaces over the garage, built before the year 2000. You're thinking, haha, my house qualifies for that. The homes also must be in any of the 209 designated zip codes. Eligible applicants will be randomly selected. Bay Area fire departments are on high alert this week, many gearing up today for what they call the most dangerous point of the fire season. The area is expected to have the worst mix of high winds and low humidity include the North Bay Interior Mountains, the East Bay Hills, the Diablo Range here in the Bay Area, the San Francisco Peninsula as well. Officials are urging everyone to sign up for alerts and have evacuation plans all mapped out before the red flag warnings begin. The Jonas Brothers are safe after Nick Jonas fled the stage in Prague when a fan pointed a laser at him. Imagine how scary that could be. Social media videos show the singer was forced to stop the show and run off the stage in the Czech Republic on Tuesday night. Brothers Joe and Kevin Jonas followed him off stage, and the arena says the show was paused for several minutes. A fan account on X said the band returned to the stage once that potential threat was taken care of. And lastly, the bidding for Shohei Ohtani's historic 50-50 ball is up to $1.7 million. The Los Angeles Dodgers star hit the ball for a home run in Miami last month, becoming the first player in the Major League Baseball history to hit 50 home runs and steal 50 bases in a season. The fan who caught the ball is selling it through Golden Auctions. The Dodgers reportedly offered him $300,000 for that ball, but the fan chose to hold on to it. Meanwhile, there's still a legal battle taking place about who actually owns that ball. 2 people filed lawsuits claiming it's rightfully theirs. All those hands coming down trying to get that ball. This report is sponsored by CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. Today I'm drinking the Moroccan mint tea. Absolutely delicious. It's the best coffee Mark has ever tasted. Hands down, the best iced tea I've ever tasted. I don't even want iced tea from anywhere else. So good. CoachellaValleyCoffee.com is the website. If you go to the website and find something you're interested in trying, please make sure to take advantage of the Mark Thompson Show exclusive discount. If you put in the code MARKT, all together with no spaces, boom, 10% off right off the total. So good and so worth it. CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. Our thanks to CoachellaValleyCoffee.com for sponsoring the news here on The Mark Thompson Show. I'm Kim McAllister, and this is The Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Y'all can all go to hell, and I'm going back to Texas.
I misspoke.
And I wanted to apologize to the Asian community, the Asian American community.
Why are you yelling?
It was great. I loved it.
How would you handle this? We could try ignoring it, sir.
They pay me a lot of money for having attitude.
There's never been anything like this.
We've never seen anything like it before.
Nobody has ever put something like this together that I've ever seen.
Have you ever seen anything like this?
There is nothing in our history that quite compares to this.
I think I'm the most honest human being, perhaps, that God ever created.
God bless America. The end.
Someone did this to spoil our Christmas.
Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God.
Sayonara, sucker!
You know what? Hal, you created havoc and chaos.
I don't think you should apologize for how you feel.
Do I hit it long? Is Trump strong? Huh?
Who is having that conversation?
We are going to do It's the Planet, Stupid. We don't have our eco-journalist Belinda today. We do have a really interesting story about the difference in animal behavior and climate change. So let's get to it. It's the planet, stupid.
The planet Earth.
Some call me nature.
I am very passionate about the planet.
Earth. A living, breathing planet capable of sustaining whatever life forms we see fit to deposit on it.
Spock, judging by the pollution content of the atmosphere, I believe we have arrived.
It's the planet, stupid.
No. It's the planet, stupid.
Yeah, let's get the picture of the baby deer up because it's just so cute. But researchers are sounding the alarm about this behavioral shift they think is pretty worrisome. It's happening in animals across the globe. And the problem is we don't exactly understand why. So scientists are looking at 2 studies on European mammals, and they found that their sleep is negatively impacted by extreme heat. The first study came from the Proceedings of the Royal Society of Biological Sciences, and they looked at wild boars in the Czech Republic. And I know that sounds totally random, but what the researchers discovered is that these boars slept 17% less on hot days in the summer than colder, even rainier days in the winter. They described summer sleep as being shorter and more fragmented and lower quality because of the higher temperature. Now, the second study was published in Animal Behavior, and it found deer fawns, like this little one in the picture, in Ireland slept poorly when facing high temperatures and or humidity. So there have also been previous studies on animal sleep. Another one was done on fruit bats. The point is, the researchers say this is really concerning because we know that regardless of your species, sleep plays a huge role in overall health. And the results of these studies, separate studies taken as a whole, show that global warming and increases in extreme climatic events are likely to negatively impact sleep and health in wildlife. So I know that's not a very positive story, but this is a huge problem. And with extreme heat on the rise around the world, these issues could become a big problem coming up. And the other issue is that there's a big gap in our understanding of sleep in the wild. So these studies allow us to kind of peek behind the curtain and take a look at what's going on there. They say, the researchers, that it might not create change on a huge scale, but that every climate-friendly action that we can take helps slow the planet's rapid heating, which could be as simple as composting in your kitchen with scraps, right? Choosing to walk or ride a bike instead of driving somewhere. That every time we act in favor of the planet, we're helping animals sleep more soundly. So there. Who doesn't want to help the animals? It's another story, environmental related story that Mark sent to me. And this one is about what happens to the world if forests stop absorbing carbon. In Finland, they have these natural sinks of forests and peat, and they're trying to become carbon neutral by 2035. But now, in Finland, apparently the land has started emitting more greenhouse gases than it actually stores. This is in the Finnish Lapland. It's been very hot. It's been very dry. The tips of tree branches are orange when they should be a deep green. The moss on the forest floor is usually damp, and it's now withering. The forests there have taken longer to grow, and it's a problem. It's an issue for people living there. And it's these forests that helped achieve this carbon neutral target. They have a law in Finland. It came into being a couple of years ago. And it means that the country is aiming to reach their carbon neutral target 15 years earlier than many of the other countries in the EU. They have 5.6 million people in Finland, 70% covered by forests and peatlands, the land there. So many assumed that it would be okay, that these trees, that the greenery would absorb the carbon and this would be okay. Because for decades, that's what happened. The forests and the peatlands removed more carbon from the atmosphere than they released. But starting in about 2010, the amount the land absorbed really started to decline. First, it was a slow decline, then it was more rapid, and by 2018, Finland's land sink, which is what scientists use to describe something that absorbs more carbon than it releases, had totally vanished. The forest sink has declined about 90% from 2009 to 2022. The rest of the decline was fueled by an increase in emissions from soil and peat as well. And in the last couple of years, there was a net, Finland's land sector was a net contributor to global heating. They say this is pretty dramatic, that Finland's overall climate progress, despite cutting emissions by 43% across all other sectors, the net emissions are about the same level as the early 1990s. Like nothing happened for the last 30 years. And it has pretty big implications, not only for Finland, but internationally as well, because at least 118 countries are relying on these carbon sinks to meet their climate targets. But that's not happening because of the climate crisis, because of human destruction. You're seeing declines in the amount of carbon that these forests are taking in. And researchers are saying we can't achieve carbon neutrality if the land sector is actually a source of emissions instead. So that's a problem. And it's the planet, stupid.
More.
It's the planet, stupid.
No. It's the planet, stupid. Next time, only on The Mark Thompson Show.
I think we have time, Tony, for one Stories from the Sky. I've been holding on to this story, and it's so good. So, bad, but also really good. So let's do a Stories from the Sky.
Cool.
We have clearance, Clarence.
Roger. What's our vector, Victor?
Enough is enough! I have had it with these monkey-fighting snakes on this Monday to Friday plane! Everybody strap in!
What kind of apology do you think Qantas Airlines owes their passengers? Possibly a "my bad, I'm sorry"? I'm trying to be a better person? I'm not sure which. Qantas Airlines is apologizing after a mature-rated film played to all the passengers on the plane. It's called Daddy-O. I haven't seen this movie, but apparently everybody on the plane did, and then some. A passenger described the in-flight entertainment as extremely inappropriate. The flight was underway. This film had been chosen by the staff. The plane was going from Sydney to Tokyo, and the in-flight entertainment system wasn't working before takeoff, and the staff were not able to fix it. So the plane takes off after more than an hour of a delay, and the crew decided, you know what, we're just going to show the same film to everyone. The problem is, the film that was chosen was a very sexually explicit drama called Daddy-O, and it started to play. This is a 9.5-hour flight. So it starts to play, and everyone aboard says they were pretty much forced to watch it because they were unable to turn off, pause, or even dim the individual screens on the seat backs in front of them. One person said the movie they played was extremely inappropriate. It featured graphic nudity, a lot of sexting, the kind where you could literally read the text on the screen without even needing headphones. It took almost an hour of this before they switched to a more kid-friendly movie, but they say it was super uncomfortable for everyone. There were families, there were kids aboard. They said, how is this acceptable for a major airline? Come on. Daddy-O, which stars Sean Penn and Dakota Johnson, it's this movie where they're in a taxi cab and they discuss sex and relationships the entire time. It's rated 18 in the UK for language, sexual material, and nudity, rated R in the United States, and MA 15+ in Australia because of its strong language and nudity. After the flight, Qantas said in a statement, "The movie was clearly not suitable to play for the whole flight. We do sincerely apologize to customers for this experience. All screens were changed to a family-friendly movie for the rest of the flight, which is our standard practice for the rare cases individual movie selection isn't possible." And they say, we are reviewing how this particular movie was selected. I mean, it's a bummer if you have kids on the flight. For anybody else, you know what? Just read your book. You don't have to look at the screen. Although people say it's right in front of you and it's not off, and so you look up and there it is in front of you. But come on, unless you have kids, and then can't you hang something over the screen? I know it's annoying, but wow. Qantas Airlines with a big, my bad, I'm super sorry. Americans can now renew passports online. This is a pretty big deal. They can bypass the paper applications, the waiting. Yeah, you can do this. This is the State Department announcing that its online renewal system is now fully operational. They've tested this in pilot programs. It's available to adult passport holders whose passport has expired within the last 5 years or will expire in the coming year. Not available for the renewal of children's passports, but for the first time, passport applicants for renewal applicants who live outside the United States for expedited applications becomes available. They say by offering this online alternative to the traditional paper application process, they are embracing a digital transformation to offer the most efficient, convenient passport renewal experience possible. Wouldn't that be nice to have a better passport application process? Finally, it becomes online. Another story, this is about Taylor Swift. Third one down, Tony, or about that. But United Airlines says Taylor Swift concerts drove a demand in flights 25% increase. Yeah. They say the Skift Global Forum is where this information came out in New York. A United executive says the carrier has seen a 25% uptick in demand for flights on weekends during which Swift held concerts abroad, and that she's having an effect on domestic travel as well. Ticket sales on United flights for U.S. concert dates for Swift, the Tortured Poets Department tour, have been Swift 2 and the Eras tour. Flights on days near her concert dates in Indianapolis, Miami, and New Orleans are already 70% full. And typically flights to these cities this far ahead would only be about 50% booked. So she continues to be this economic powerhouse, boosting spending in the local economies, boosting airline travel as well. Market research firm Question Pro estimated that all told, Swift's Eras tour could help add $5 billion to the global economy. So that's pretty cool. Now, United has not added flights for Swift concerts, but Southwest did do that. They said they were adding flights to accommodate the strong demand for travel to Swift's performances in Miami and New Orleans this month. They say following strong demand from last year's U.S. tour, the airline is adding more than 10 flights to its schedule to help Swifties get to and from her concerts. And that is Stories from the Sky.
This has been Stories from the Sky. The captain has turned off the seatbelt sign, and you are now free to move about the cabin.
Huge, humongous thank you for everyone coming to the show, participating today. Thank you to Tony. You just killed it with all the pictures and the good stuff that you were showing. Thank you for the folks that have contributed via PayPal and Patreon and the super chats and super stickers. We seriously could not do the Mark Thompson Show without you. You are the reason that we are continuing 2 years and going strong. Tomorrow on the Mark Thompson Show, I am very excited to remind you that David Katz will be on the show, former federal prosecutor, now defense attorney, and there's a lot to ask him about. So tomorrow, David Katz. Next, the After Party Live. We'll take it non-politics. It's Waterfall Wednesday. If you haven't subscribed to the After Party Live, Tony will put the link in the chat. Please come and subscribe because I need you. I need you desperately.
I'm Shadow Stevens for the Mark Thompson Show. Bye-bye.
Mark and Courtney will see you in San Francisco for the San Francisco Fall Show. And we'll all see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.